Bingo Thunderslice, and today's video is Kid, examining the optimal challenge of parenthood and raising kids. Yeah, kind of another in the stream of the divine union and examining the, archetype of the, the cosmic father and the cosmic mother, and how our legitimate moral and social structures and conventions here in this world are emanations of those divine archetypes, right? That there is a heavenly father, and the effective father in this world emulates, that attitude. And, even though I'm sort of a Jordan Peterson Gnostic Christian, right? I believe in sort of the general Christian morality, but I don't subscribe to any particular denomination. That, I don't actually go to church. I don't actually even own a Bible right now. But, I find that when I do read passages from the Bible, I usually just feel like intuitively I know what it's talking about. And I sense the meaning and power of the words. And it very much resonates with truth. And, back when I was an edgy boy atheist, starting from pretty much the 4th grade and lasting until my 5th encounter with psilocybin, somewhere around age 16 or 17, I was an atheist, and I believe that the sheer absurdity of the stories in the scriptures, from a rational point of view, just, a priori I made them not of value, not of meaning. But I think that that's really a con that the secular society brings onto us, and gets us to doubt things that, there's really, in the occult tradition, there's 4 levels of understanding of the scriptures, right? The first one is the literal, and that's what we teach to children so that they can learn the stories and they can internalize those archetypes. But, there's 3 additional levels, just in conventional, at least, in the Judaic view of the scriptures, and the higher level, again, there's always the public story for consumption, and the story that is fed to the common people that is simple enough for them to understand. But there's always additional layers of truth that is reserved for those who are mature enough to interact with it. And so this is really, leading into my topic today. I started thinking about this after a conversation with Space Panther last night, and she, was in Reno for a bachelorette party, and, she was, there were some older women there, one of which who had kids, that were old, but none of the other women there, that were younger around our, generation had any kids. And, one thing they were saying to her, they're playing all these bachelorette games and whatnot, and, Space Panther brought Ari out there, and they're all, just, fawning over, Arya because she's super cute, and just basically, but some of them were saying, I'm glad that people like you are having kids, because it makes me feel better about not wanting to have kids, and not, me not having kids. And kind of just talking about how, they feel like they like, they don't have anything against kids in and of themselves, but they don't really want to engage in that path and adventure of motherhood themselves, of parenthood. That they'd rather just, fawn over other people's kids, but ultimately maintain their kind of carefree lifestyle. And, again, everybody is allowed to do whatever they want. But, one thing I have developed away from, my libertarian sort of secular philosophy into more of a conservative spiritual philosophy, religious philosophy, is that society isn't made any better when everybody's doing their own little random thing. And, again, we don't have to force everybody to do the same thing, but there's a difference between forcing people to do something and encouraging people to do something. Of demanding someone do something, at gunpoint, versus leading by example and showing people how to live and actually fulfilling the archetype, right? Walking the talk. Not having 2 sets of rules or more, depending on how connected you are to positions of authority. Not this banana republic, but actually a kingdom of heaven, a society and nation of people who individually follow the word of God and individually sustain that convergent evolution. bringing us up and higher towards that divine consciousness that imbues all activity and energy and space and time throughout the universe. It is all dimensionally contained in a single point, and that single point has a defined structure. And when we examine the structure throughout the physical cosmos, we see this resonating structure. We see the toroid and the hyperboloid. We have basically the hourglass and the donut, and this comprises all spaces. Every single galaxy, every single atom, the Earth, right, the Sun. All of these basically follow this same unified geometry. It is a fractal system. There is energy flowing from one electrode to the other electrode, and through that, between that, is the entire physical universe. And so when we talk about the absolute realms, right, in the spiritual and religious tradition, right, the cliff oath, right, of the different realms, the tree of life. All right, and yet another lovely phone call from the lovely Space Panther. And so where was I? Yes, just talking about the value of parenthood, the optimal challenge of recreating yourself and becoming part of that great chain link, part of that great tree, that family tree. And, it's just so rewarding in a lot of ways, but also people look at you differently. Even if you're successful and can bear a lot of responsibility in your career, and you have a lot of maturity in a professional sense, people still, if you don't have a family, you don't have kids, even if you take on lots of responsibility in other ways, you're still kind of a kid, right? Even if you're like a Navy SEAL, but you've never actually, created a family, like you're still just kind of a kid playing out just kind of, your adolescence. And because it is only when you actually come together with another person and have that bond that it takes a level of humility and cooperation and basically, just peace and grace that you can do very well as a single person and never have to really confront many of these aspects of a personality, because you don't really, have that. It's, you're basically in your own echo chamber. You can say whatever you want. No one's going to get offended because you're the only one there. And you can always move if anyone does, right? But once you actually commit to someone, when you actually engage in that long-term partnership, you really do have to, temper yourself and learn how to work synergistically and, not take all the air out of the room and, learn how to provide for another person, not to sacrifice yourself per se. Although, part of that vow is protecting the other person in any case, at least in this case of the man, in my view. But you have to basically know that, you can't run away. You're going to stick around. And again, I used to be so averse to marriage because I thought of it as just, buying a house in suburbia and, basically all the adventure of life going away. But the truth is that my life has become far more, dynamic and exciting and successful and positive in lots of different ways since Space Panther and I got married, which was just about 5 years ago. And it's interesting to see like my grandparents who were married for 50 or 60 years. And, I see my parents' generation and, especially in Reno, Reno's where marriages go to die in general, right? And I just feel like the boomers and the whole TV generation, they really lost out on a lot of the value that got lost in translation during just the whole craziness that was the 20th century. And, it's... part of it is their fault, part of it isn't their fault, same with all generations in a sense, but it definitely hasn't been positive, the influence of widespread, culturally acceptable divorce in society. Even back when I supported gay marriage and I ridiculed the argument of the sanctity of marriage, because it's like, what about divorce? Like, how sanct is marriage when you can just basically, get it completely, annulled and dissolved? it just doesn't seem like such a holy bond, till death do us part, if you can just absolve it. And, people have, second wives and third wives and all the rest. And again, it's like, even Trump has like, a second or third wife. And again, the point of this video is not to judge people. It's just to say that there is a positive value in the actual archetype of marriage, and there is positive value in the archetype of the father and the mother, and basically, learning how to recreate those cultural values, as well as physical virtues and mental virtues, and building that civilization of realizing that it's not all just pissing into the wind, that there is a cumulative aspect, and that we can increase this world, we can make it better. And in fact, we do every day. And just like Jordan Peterson says, if you would just get your life together, clean your room, bucko, and, provide value in your own little realm, even if you're just working, a very lowly job, treat it as if it is important. Be important in your life, be the main character of your movie. And, because if you're not that person to yourself, why should you be that person to anyone else? It's such a drag to be around people who are always, just talking about how bad everything is and how shitty everyone is. It's like, even if that's true, then just be a hermit and be happy away from them. Like, there's, a lot of smart people in the world, lots and lots of smart people in the world who are unhappy because they're always, complaining about the stupidity of other people. And I always remind those people, hey, if you get to old age or even middle age and you're still complaining about the stupid people, in a daily basis on like a really like deep bothering sense, then it just shows that there's more stupid people than you may be even aware. Because, if you were really that smart, you would remove yourself from that situation. You would find that peace, you would find that happiness, or at least some form of contentment enough to just perform your great work and to build into this world with the input and constructive feedback that you are able to offer. And, again, people, when they see that you have kids, even if you're young, they treat you different, right? They give you more responsibility because they know that you're in it now. Like, you can't run away and give up, unless you're, certain socioeconomic groups, if you will, in this country who actually find it, very acceptable to just dip out on a family and to abandon their kids. But, of course, much has been said about that we don't need to necessarily repeat here. But suffice to say is that when parents abandon their kids, when they try and engage in a single parenthood, endeavor and think that it's just the same as marriage, again, we all deal with situations that are imperfect, but the difference is that now there's a cultural push to normalize these things, to remove the stigma of abortion, so to speak, as Lena Dunham would say, to remove the stigma for single parenthood, to eliminate the obsolete patriarchal notion that a two-parent household of a mother and father is actually the best situation for any child. It's just heteronormative tyranny and oppression. That's all that is. But it's nonsense. And critical theory ultimately, it leaves people rudderless. It leaves them broken, weak, and just, aimless. They become the free radicals within the body politic and just start dissolving cell walls and breaking things. And they perform no constructive function because they have lost all internal coherence. They don't have any constructive aspect internally. Everything is just breaking things down. Literally, critical theory is deconstruction. Is deconstruction of social norms and values. They are, but you might call it just demolition because they're not even deconstructing it, right? They basically just rename things and pretend like they're smart, and they write all these long academic papers that are filled with just complete nonsense. And, then they get a degree, they give themselves degrees, they give themselves awards, and, basically then we've got this big academic society of pink-haired, 300-pound trans feminists, and, where once we had Phi Beta Kappa, right? There's so many brilliant and powerful women in this world, again, and they are conservative, and they are still resonating with those divine archetypes, right? My grandmother, well, both of my grandmothers, are, one of which is no longer with us in this plane, and she was Phi Beta Kappa, which is a very elite academic. In fact, Amy Coney Barrett, who will soon be appointed as Justice to the Supreme Court, is also Phi Beta Kappa. And my grandmother, this was back in the early 50s when it was very uncommon for women to be participating in academia, especially at that level. And my grandma was definitely no progressive liberal. And there's a wisdom that got evaporated and dissolved in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and it basically, again, it left this wake of broken relationships, of people that were so jaded and calcified and so turned off by all of their past experiences that they just didn't even have any interest in going forward. And basically it was, again, these people are just kind of ambling through life. I see a lot of Gen Xers as well as boomers who just really are just completely burned out. Millennials and Zoomers are dealing with a different sort of issue, but generally, as I started with the story, the millennials are very much in this kind of freewheeling bohemian type aspect where they think it's basically their highest good and service to basically, not that they necessarily think of it that way, but some of them do, to be vagabonds, to not increase the population. Again, the climate cult implicitly tells people that if you have kids, you're killing the planet, which is bullshit, right? Of course it's bullshit, but it's a death cult. It's a false religion. It's a siren song for people who are watching their society be destroyed through their own negligence, inaction, and general incompetence. But again, there is the immunity cells. There are the red blood cells to, stand guard and defend the body politic and make sure that the entire structure stays intact. And we, maintain at least some modicum of homeostasis. Man, Trump is out of the hospital as of yesterday. I and everybody else called it who has a brain. I mean, more could happen, but it's not a deadly disease, guys. There's cases, there's a second wave of cases, but there's no second wave of deaths. Nobody's dying. It's tiny, tiny amounts that are totally underneath a normal flu season. And it's because, we have the therapeutics, we have an understanding of the virus, whereas before we were almost shooting in the dark from the hip. But now, we don't even need the vaccine. Again, we have a flu vaccine, and there's still like 60 to 80,000 people that die, on a normal year in the United States from the flu. So they want to keep pretending like, when the vaccine gets here, it's all going to go away and we can, go back to normal. Except they're also saying we'll never go back to normal. We have to get vaccinated and maintain fascist medical communism for the rest of time. It's like, okay, yep, sure thing, bud. Just put on my Rachel Maddow and my TV shows and my movies. And what color should I dye my hair next? And what should I get for my next piercing? And all this crazy nonsense. You can have anything you want, different colors, different flavors, as long as you don't question the party dogma, as long as you don't actually align yourself with the field of God and create those children of God in the world. That is ultimately the most rebellious thing that anyone can do against the progressive, liberal, communist, authoritarian regime. And that's why, again, I don't necessarily think of my daughters as in that frame when I'm seeing them and I'm hanging out with them. I love them and they mean everything to me. But I also have meaning in my life when I realize that people who don't have that optimal challenge, people who are just kind of, taking mushrooms and drinking and smoking and going to festivals, like, it's fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, that's what your 20s are for, I guess, But then it's like when you get to 30 and onward, it's like if that's still like your prime operating directive, it's time to ask some questions about yourself. Is this really what you expect to be doing for the entire world, entire rest of your life? Because, again, one of our neighbors is an old lady who doesn't have kids, and she just, she has a very nice garden, right? She cares about a lot of little tiny details of her property very much, but she doesn't seem like a very content person. Seems like there's almost a void in her life, that isn't being filled by tending her garden. And again, I'm not here to judge these people's lives. I'm just here to say that there is positive value in the archetype of marriage and of the father and the mother and of the child, right? And of the Holy Ghost that is in between and uniting all of it, right? That etheric field of God, of negentropy, that brings us all forward and upward into the kingdom of heaven, if we should only choose to participate. And it's not really much more complex than that at a certain point. It doesn't matter how much wealth you have. If you resolve to build value in this world, you are a billionaire, in a sense, in the etheric currency, right? That is, always legal tender in the kingdom of heaven, because it's really the only thing that ultimately matters is that energy, that value, and that pure intent brought into the world. And if you can replicate that in the next generation, my friend, we've already won the game. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Peace.
Ah.